and dealing with obstacles that arise in practice of meditation. It's some of the obstacles are very subtle, and therefore sometimes we really can't see them as obstacles. One thing, doubt is a very subtle one. And you think if I doubts will come about what you should do with your life. Should I ordain? Should I not ordain? What should I work for nuclear disarmament or not? Should I work in the society as an activist, political activist, or should I just watch my breath for the rest of my life? Then we have a lot of views and opinions that seemingly are very important to us. Our whole kind of emotional makeup is secured very much to certain ideas. And to let that go of those ideas is quite difficult. Feel that somehow we're betraying, somehow letting go of something, or not being responsible. This sense of duty is a very powerful obstacle in the way of enlightenment. The seemingly overwhelming sense of duty. Sometimes we think we have this desire to help other people, strong desire to inform others or to help others. And that is seemingly so good that to let go of that desire seems also being irresponsible or selfish. So that recognize that the mind itself is the one where we have a very strong attachments to perceptions in the mind. Some of the perceptions are very good. We're not saying all, sometimes it's easy to let go of unpleasant things or not very nice perceptions, conditions of mind. But the idea of the letting go, rather, of very wonderful perceptions of mind is quite difficult. Many people ask, what about creativity? People get worried that Buddhist monks aren't creative, or that we're not doing anything for the arts, for refined, or aesthetic creativity, because this perception of being creative and of artistic refinement is held as being very important in the mind, very important to many people. Or social duty, or family duty, and so forth. These are very strong perceptions, very strong attachments to them. So that the practice of meditation is not just forming another perception that you have to let go of everything as a perception. I mean, taking a position of letting go as an absolute kind of rejection of everything, is it? That's another kind of perception you create from meditation. And Venerable Sumedho says, let go of everything. Which sounds like you have to just run away from your children, not care about your family anymore, turn your back on nuclear disarmament, being politically active, social activists, or whatever. The idea, some people think that all that we do with chitters, that our monasteries just sit and watch one inhalation and exhalation, one after another. So you don't. What do you do for the society? What are you doing for the society? You are just dropping out. You're not being responsible. Because they've made a perception, created a perception in their mind that Buddhist monks somehow are just kind of copping out. We can't cope with the complexities of the world, so we're just kind of living in these little remote places, watching our breath till we die. But that's also another perception that people have of a Buddhist monk. Think of that somehow we should be more like Mother Teresa, going to the slums of London, going to Tottenham or Islington and places like that, East End, and doing social work. Instead, living in countryside of West Sussex, very beautiful part of England. So there are these idealistic visions, aren't they, that we all have, of a kind of dedicating our lives to helping the poor. And yet how many people, the people that do this usually are not all that committed to living in the East End of London themselves. But we have these ideals that we sometimes love to think about and grasp. And the idea, the perception of having to let them go seems like a betrayal. But letting go as a way of practice isn't what it seems to be at all. It's not what you think letting go really is. So that we have to really investigate attachment, not think about it or form more perceptions about attachment, but actually recognize attachment and see what happens when we do attach to something. If you attach to an ideal, you're no longer really capable of doing anything very worthwhile, because the attachment itself means that you have no longer a clear vision. You're just coming from a viewpoint rather than from clear insight. So your mind already comes from a bias. You impose that upon others, upon yourself. And why do so many idealistic causes fail or never really work, or only work for a little while, and then people get lost, deluded by them? And before I became a monk, I was a very, very idealistic person, trying desperately to dedicate my life to noble causes. So I joined peace movements and the Quakers and all kinds of, in America, wanting to do something worthwhile, only to feel some great lack, something. I mean, I could agree with the ideals, but there seemed to be a lack of real wisdom in any of these things. And one could get enthusiastic about the ideal, But then one saw that in one's own life one was so caught up in fear and desire that there didn't seem to be anything one could really do to help anyone else. So it became quite apparent that it was necessary to get at the very root of fear and desire, rather than just to kind of overlook them for the sake of an ideal. That's what brings us into meditation, isn't it? Brings us into taking a retreat, sitting for 10 days, watching your inhalations, exhalations, and the rubbish that comes up in your mind. Or all the ideals, or the ideas that might arise. We can become very inspired on a retreat. Now the problem of, say, European society these days isn't illiteracy, is it? Isn't it really much of a problem here in Switzerland? The masses of people not being oppressed, not being able to read and write, starving in poverty and being exploited. It's not a problem in Europe at this time. We seem to have all the democratic institutions operating to some degree of efficiency. Just in Britain we have the parliamentary system. It works. We have social welfare, socialized medicine, unions, labor unions, and freedom of the press, public education, scholarships paid for you study at university. You see, the whole institutional structure of Britain is pretty good, based on justice and mercy and being fair, taking care of the poor, helping the minorities, and all that. And yet, I mean, we've got all these ideal institutions, and yet people still complain. Endless discontentment, because there's still attachment, isn't there? There's still so much attachment and expectation leads to despair, disappointment. We thought once we have democratic government, then everything will be all right. Met somebody about 10 years ago. I was in India and met a man, an Indian, who was very active in terrorist movements during the British colonial period. He was young, and he had this idea that once you got the British out of India, everything would be wonderful. But the problem with India was that the British were there. And once we get rid of them, India will be prosperous, develop, be a world power, solve all our problems. It's the British. So when the British left, things got worse. Things didn't seem to get any better. The idea was that colonialism is bad, British don't belong there, they're being unfair, we've got to get them out. And one can focus one's attention on one thing that seems wrong and think that once that's made right, then everything will be all right. How many of you have scapegoats or things that you think, once this is set right, then I'll be happy? Once the government here is truly wise and lives up to my expectations and ideals, then this country will really be a good place. Top grade. Or we think, once I get my university degree, once I get once I meet the person I'm meant to marry, once this happens, then I'll be perfectly happy. There's always this hope, isn't it? Expectation. Something, some goal you can look forward to, and then once you get it, what happens? And how there's still something missing. I remember in the university system in the States, and think, once I get my bachelor's degree, that's all and then everything will go all right. I just need to get that bachelor's degree. Everything will just flow from that time on. Success, everything. And then it was master's. And then after that, PhD. I didn't bother with that one. That time I caught on. But then people I know that have PhDs still looking for something. But while we do have an immediate goal, we can kind of put our attention on that and think, once I achieve that, then I will be happy. Or once I get that, then everything will be all right. Notice the attachment to the perception that somehow we expect something to happen in the future. We expect, and that we anticipate, we desire. Though we miss the present moment. We're always busy doing something now to achieve something in the future. The gaining mind, the achieving mind, the attainment. And then whatever we attain, if we get our desire, and we get that what we want, then we have to start wanting something else, because that's the way our mind perceives the world. It perceives everything, isn't it? Can you ever really be happy when you get what you want? Is that enough? Getting what you want, is that going to really content you, make you really content with everything? Reflect on this to see just what the limitations of human happiness are, and gratification of desire and achievement and attainment. And I'm in a position now, in Britain, to meet all kinds of people. So very successful people, very unsuccessful people. They're all discontented. Successful people are discontented, rich, wealthy people are discontented, poor people, failures, successes, men, women. So the human suffering is due to this attachment, and the mind always longing for something. Let's notice here during this time how when you're really blissful is when you're fully just at ease with the present moment. The mind isn't thinking about what it wants or what it has to do. When the mind is really clear, when you're really with the moment, the sense of real peace and ease, bliss. But that doesn't mean that you can't do anything, does it? You can still cook, you can still clean, sweep the floor. One can still do things. It doesn't mean that one is just caught in a kind of immobile state of just sitting here, being completely content, not being able to even get up off the floor. When the mind is clear, even sweeping a floor is blissful. Washing a dish. dishwashing at the chitters. People think that's a responsibility nobody wants and complain, because dishwashing, I think, is always, one has this perception of it as being something totally unpleasant. If you're really mindful, dishwashing is very nice to do. Very pleasant to wash a dish. Put it on a table. Just pick things up and put things down. Everything is quite perfect when the mind isn't thinking about something else. But if I'm doing the dishes and I think, I don't want to do the dishes. I had to do the dishes yesterday. Why can't Virdamo do the dishes today? He said he was too busy. When I break a cup, you don't know how many cups have been broken at Chitta. It's embarrassing if I told you, because you think people practice mindfulness there. If they make me do the dishes tomorrow, I'm going to leave. The things the kind of boring, tedious things of existence are no longer that way when the mind is empty. So we can do them very well. When you're with things, when you're with the moment, then even the most mundane, ordinary, kind of boring fact of existence is perfect. We don't want it to, we don't complain about it. We don't want it to be otherwise. Even things like having to do something quite unpleasant, like do some kind of work where you get dirty. You don't complain or think about it and resent it. Even that's all right. It's perfect. But if you start thinking, why should I have to do this dirty work? I went to university, I've studied, I was meant to do much better kind of work than this. So we become discontented in complaining. And so we never have even when we're doing the work that we think we would like to do, because of the momentum of habit, we can't ever really enjoy it very much. Because there's only little things, certain parts of it we like to do, that we might find pleasurable, and then we try to do those, and the rest of it we don't notice, or we don't really, aren't really with the parts that we may not like. So during this retreat, you have an opportunity to just recognize maybe for a few moments of the day, just being able to sit, just being with the moment, sitting with the body as it is, or standing or walking. Most ordinary thing, just the breath itself. Just standing up and walking out of the room. Just going to bed at night, laying down and noticing the breath, or relaxing into the darkness, things like that. Just being able to enjoy the light on the sun through the window, without grasping, clutching, or wanting to hold it, to keep it, to make something out of it, or to get rid of something that's unpleasant. Our minds, we can go out and annoy the whole world with them if we want. Being averse to the noise of the machinery, the noise of an airplane. I hate airplanes, hate those jet airplanes that fly overhead, ruin my meditation. Or during the meditation someone falls asleep and snores and everybody's woke. So we can dwell on, send our minds out to kind of complain about the way the world is. But that is suffering, isn't it? That's what human suffering is. Wanting things to be otherwise. Never really allowing the world to be as it is. Not accepting it as it is. But always wanting to change it, improve it, destroy it, recreate it in some way. And this is the human problem of attachment due to ignorance, to not understanding the way things are. So letting go isn't being irresponsible in the sense of actually being irresponsible. We're not actually just saying, none of my business, I'm not going to be responsible for anything, I'm going to let go. But it's not creating problems around the existing condition. So when we do that, we can do whatever has to be done. We can adapt to change. Notice how much misery is done in the name of religion. Why is that? Because people have perceptions of sinners and the devil, and the other people. We have perceptions that those people are wicked or they're ignorant, and we have to make them understand everything according to the way we believe. So you have a kind of missionary attitude where you think, my duty to convert you, make you think like I do, believe the way I do, because you might go to hell. You'll go to hell if you don't do everything the way I do. And that's a perception, isn't it, that we're attached to. Actually believe that if you don't believe in the God that I believe in, then you're going to hell. So then we think, it's my duty I don't want you to go to hell, I want you to go to heaven with me, so I have to go and convert you. Very kind of simple logic involved in all that, isn't it? But it's a grasping hold of a perception of God, perception of what you are, of what I must do, and it all comes from ignorance, from not really being aware of time and place, not understanding how things really are. People can believe in anything, can't they? They attach to the perceptions of the most ridiculous things, really. I'm amazed sometimes at the things people actually believe in. Educated people too, not just kind of ignorant savages, but highly educated beings are quite willing to believe in the most kind of strange perceptions and be attached to the most strange ideas. Because attachment to perception, to some kind of position. The human mind, the ignorant human being, is attached, is bound to what we call samsara, or the cycles based on ignorance. Just repeating the same habits over and over. So we talk about creativity as a perception rather than truly being creative with an empty mind. So we just recreate boring things. When I was in the university, I decided I wanted to know more about creativity, so I started seeking friends among the artists and poets. Berkeley, California. the early 60s. I grew a beard, mustache. Wore sloppy clothes. Wanted to fit into the avant-garde. Thinking that they had a message for me. Something I had to learn, and they had some secrets that I didn't know yet. And there's endless discussions about art for art's sake. About creativity. It's so boring. I began to see what an indulgence it really was, that how it was just, people just seemed to be attached to a lot of ideas, and to maybe a certain kind of talent. And they talked about expressing your inner self a lot. I want to be able to express my true self. And I kept thinking, from what I can see, they haven't really anything worth expressing. There's something hidden there, maybe, that will come out. And one began to see that it was so much of what they were doing was just an expression of their egos, wasn't it? This is what I've done. This is what I can do. Isn't this beautiful? Maybe I'll be the great American artist of the century, or the great poet. So the ego was always bound up in what they wanted to express. I kept thinking, they don't have anything really to say. They're just expressing their egos. Art just seems so egotistical. They all had to have their names written on it. And then they didn't seem to have any real great wisdom coming from it, or any real peace of mind. It seemed to become an obsession. I thought, what is it if you really, like when art is really great, when we call things that aren't just, that seem to have a universal message, or something coming from, no doubt, really great art comes from an empty mind, not from an egotistical expression of, look at me, look at what I can do. That important thing is the empty mind, isn't it? Not particular talents of sorts. Because if we're doing things just from an egotistical position, all we're doing is reproducing old things. Just the monotonous recreation of old habits over and over and over. And we know that. When you say, just notice how somebody that has not any real wisdom says wise words, we don't want to listen, do we? All the words, wise sayings, have been said already. Written down, said over and over and over. Everything wise has been said already by somebody. So any old fool can say wise things. But when a fool says wisdom, we don't want to listen, do we? When an egotistical, selfish person is saying all these wise, giving you advice, might be very good advice too. You don't want to listen. Why? Because you know that it's just recreation of old hackneyed phrases of wisdom that the person doesn't really know. You're just saying all the wise things out that you know already anyway. And you know it's hypocrisy. And then someone with a pure mind says something wise. It might be the same thing that the fool says, but it suddenly, oh yes, wonderful. Now what is it, in speaking or in art or anything that really reaches the heart of a person? It's the pure intention, isn't it? The pure mind that it's coming from, not from just reproducing things over and over and over. From just to say, look at what I know, how wise I am, how skilled, how talented I am. So even our good works and our good intentions, if we come from a place of fear and desire, it still doesn't really reach, doesn't get to the cause, to the real source, of things. It's still this kind of endless recycling of the same energies over and over and over in samsara. It's recycling it all. So it keeps going in these endless cycles, and nothing ever really spontaneous, ever fresh comes, but just the boring recreations of the same old things. One time in Chitters, some art students came from, there's a art school in Farnham, not far away from Chitters, famous art school. And these students came to Chitters Monastery one day, and they were all asking about meditation. So I said, what do they teach you in the art school? Well, it's a very competitive art school. And you learn all these different skills, graphics and all this painting and sculpture. And they were all worried about their examinations and about what kind of work they would be able to get after they leave this school. I said, do you ever meditate? Do you have any kind of training? Did they ever encourage you in the art school to, not just in training you in skills, various skills with materials, but in attitudes? They have maybe philosophic attitudes that are common at the time and among various teachers, but the actual understanding of the creative process seemed to be totally lacking. Very much seemed to be a kind of competitive feeling. Some people are more talented than others. People more skilled in this and that than other people. Now the miracle of life is the fact that the condition arises out of the unconditioned, goes back to the unconditioned. What can be more miraculous than something coming out of nothing? like Sai Baba, been able to produce mangoes out of the palms of his hands. It's more miraculous than that, isn't it? Something arising out of nothing, out of emptiness, and going back to emptiness. So that emptiness itself is not just like a nothingness, is it? But somehow the miracles of existence, the real miracle of existence, we don't notice. We might think of more kind of extreme conditions that arise as being miracles, special conditions that arise as miraculous conditions. But actually, we're all miracles. You're a miracle. Just think how he came into these bodies. Kind of little protoplasmic egg and sperm coming together. And this is what happens 50 years later. Miraculous, isn't it? But what is miraculous has become very ordinary. It's common, and it's just recreated all the time, isn't it? The endless miracles. After miracles are just reproduced over and over and over, then we just take them for granted. So we think of miracles as kind of special conditions that arise that we've never seen before, or that we don't understand all that well, or how they could possibly come about. And what is most unmiraculous, which isn't a miracle at all, seems quite miraculous to us, like the peace of your own mind, the quietness of it. The emptiness of your own mind is like a miracle, isn't it? Didn't know it existed. Thought my mind was just always a confused mass of thoughts and desires. All the miracles, endless miracles, bubbling up all over the place. But what is completely ordinary, meaning that it is not miraculous in any way, doesn't arise, doesn't pass away, there all the time, we don't notice because of the endless miracles that are coming and going all the time. Let's contemplate the what this particular kind of image that I'm producing of conditions arising and passing away to the unconditioned. Then the knowing. There's the knowing of both, isn't there? One can know the emptiness or the condition. The knowing. And that knowing is not miraculous either. So the things that are really miraculous are what we take for granted, what we identify with. But we keep reproducing them over and over and over, so they become boring and worn and jaded and create a lot of suffering all the time. Get so weary of thinking the same dull, stupid thoughts, of having fears and the same old desires and obsessions coming and going in your mind all the time. Won't it ever shut up? Won't my mind ever shut up? When I was a monk, I remember about 3 or 4 years, first 3 years, my mind just, first year I had a lot of kind of blazing insights. I understood all kinds of things, just blazing insights. The third year, didn't have anything. I was just sitting there in the monastery, trying to have all these, I kept thinking, the first year I had these wonderful insights. Why don't I have those insights now? Why can't I, though I do all the things that I did the first year. Did a lot of ascetic practices, nearly starved myself, sat for hours, wouldn't lay down, and all I get was sore knees, boring kind of depressing mental states, and a mind that just went constant kind of monotonous drone of worries and nagging little things, just really annoying, nagging little things coming up in it all the time. Nothing interesting, no great passions. just boring, tedious, monotonous, nagging, droning mind. I used to think, won't it ever shut up? Is it going to just go on like this forever? Then I after a few more years, I became very the mind, the kind of dreariness became more just dullness, began to just kind of seek a dull state, sit there, thinking I was letting go. Everything just become very dull. And then I thought, wonder if this is nirvana. So the conditions of the mind can be great passions, can be fantastic things, extreme kind of things where you see blazing lights and angels descending and beatific vision. You can have the Sarpana Jitta experiences of just seeing beauty everywhere, that kind of thing. Or you can have just dreary, endless, kind of monotonous, boring thoughts and obsessions going to your mind. But the miraculous part is that whatever comes goes. It comes out of nothing and goes back to nothing. It goes out of the void and goes back to the void. Now, in our attachment, in the attachment to perceptions, is that the ego doesn't want us, egotistically, we'd like to identify more with the kind of fantastic things. At least my nature is one to dread mediocrity. So that the kind of mediocre states of mind one didn't want to be. And anything special and really super and fantastic, and hope that would be the way it would really be. The idea of attaining something, of being someone who actually attained something from spiritual practice. And then the endless fears that one was, and doubts that one had gained nothing from it. Sometimes one feels, even after years, I don't think I've gained anything. I don't see any change. I thought I was going to be enlightened for a while, but it was a mistake. The doubt. But that also is another condition of mind. It's only when we begin to turn away from conditions, whatever they are, the hopes, expectations, anticipations, fears, doubts, and worries, our ideals, as well as our fears, the fantastic conditions as well as the monotonous, boring ones, the beautiful as well as the ugly. Turning away doesn't mean rejection, it means non-attachment. Meaning we don't create anything around the existing beauty or misery. For example, when you experience emptiness, you turn to the emptiness of your mind. And in that way you can be with the beauty or the ugliness or the pleasure or pain without attaching to it. So there's no karma created around those conditions anymore. In other words, you're not recycling old karma, it's reinforcing it. Then creativity seems to happen quite on its own without any egotistical involvement. But it's a spontaneity, not just endless recycling of the same old habits. And the talents, the abilities that one might have, they have in this particular lifetime, can be modes of expression through emptiness rather than through ego. Then there's no attachment to it. There's not the sense of me and mine in regards to anything that arises or passes. So there's no suffering. In the empty mind, all conditions can arise and pass, or it can be just empty. Infinite potential for everything, from the most fantastic to the most mediocre, most miserable. So in that emptiness, it seems like almost like a vibrant potentiality of everything. Or nothing. It has one begins to just be the knowing, content with the knowing, with being aware. No longer demanding, expecting, or if these things do arise, one knows them. No longer as egotistical problems, but just as conditions. Karma that is fading out. You allow it to cease. You allow things to go to cessation, rather than just reinforcing them, making them go around and around all the time, in obsessive cycles. Now our human birth, being a human being, they don't waste your this human lifespan. It's the opportunity for you, the great opportunity to get off the wheel. You think, oh well, maybe I'll put it off for the next lifetime. But why? What's the point of putting anything off when you can do it now? Except you don't maybe understand yet. It's still attached to an idea that putting off something means that you're going to have to, that you're attached to the perception that you have to do something, change something. The fear of having to give up something. The fear that the perceptions of like, say, of renunciation. People think, like bhikkhus, they say, oh, the poor bhikkhus. They've given up everything. They don't have any money, no sex, celibate. They eat only one meal a day. I don't know how they can stand that, just eating one meal a day. It's only in Switzerland that we get cheese every day. We call Switzerland the bhikkhu's paradise. The allowables of chocolate and cheese are the best in the world here in Switzerland. So that we come here to experience paradise. But actually, renunciation is just simplification. It's letting go of things that are not really necessary. It's like easing the burden of life. Simplifying things, letting go of things. Because life is, we create these tremendous burdens, things we feel we have to have in order to be happy. Afraid of being without something that we might suffer. And the sense of security and wanting things definite and guaranteed, so strong. Attachment to the perceptions of security. And yet every form of security that we attach to is insecure. It's unsatisfactory. It's just the belief in security that we find some kind of emotional attachment to. the Buddha established the order of monks during the 40 years after his enlightenment. So he established all the rules, and the rules are make us totally insecure. Do you realize how helpless a Buddhist monk is? Just by the rules that we have. I didn't realize this when I ordained, actually. It's after I ordained that I began to study the discipline more, and I realized what I had done, what I got myself into. And so I thought, why? What is the point? Why did the Buddha establish such rules? To make us totally dependent on lay people. I thought, because I was brought up in the family in America where we were, the idea was to be self-sufficient and independent. The idea of being dependent was disgraceful. The idea of depending on alms or charity was disgusting. The idea of being self-sufficient, never having to ask anybody for anything, having all your own money, everything provided for, the future guaranteed, life insurance, old age benefits, health insurance, everything kind of set up. You spent your life working to make sure that the rest of your life was secure, so that you'd never be a burden to anyone, never be dependent on anyone, never have to ask for anything. Totally independent. Completely independent was the idea. And then I find myself, a Buddhist monk in Thailand, completely dependent. With the idea of collecting one meal a day in an alms bowl, and then not being able to even keep the food that's extra for the next day. You have to give up. Even if you get a lot of food one day, you think, well, maybe I better keep this food because I can't eat it all right now. I'll just keep it for the next day to make sure that I have enough for tomorrow. Can't do that. There's no way you can hoard things. You see, rules against hoarding. So that the food that I eat for one meal, then anything extra has to be given away at that time. Also, I can't grow food, can't garden, I can't dig in the soil and grow cabbages to eat. I can't pick apples off the trees or pick them up off the ground. I can't have money, so I can't go and buy food. Even if you come and say, here's your food, Venerable Sumedho, and you put it down, I can't even eat it till you hand it to me. You have to actually give it to me. And you have to actually come close to give it to me. You can't just kind of reach out like that. You're supposed to come, the rules are so strict, you're supposed to come in at a forearm's distance and offer it like that. And then I can eat that, if it's between dawn and noon. Why did he do this to me? If only I could just grow my own food, if I could have a little patch and grow cabbages. Or maybe just a little money, that I could just provide for myself in case of a difficult time. Don't want to have to always bother the lay people or make people offer things or anything like that. It's a nuisance. There's a lot of rationalizations that one can use, very kind of practical, sensible rationalizations about why one needn't bother with all that. But actually it's a way of training oneself in a very skillful way. To depend solely on the generosity and kind hearts of other beings. So that in the society will be generated. The kindness, charitableness, sensitivity and concern, that kind will be generated within the society. be an actual opportunity for not just writing a check to the Red Cross and mailing it, but actual taking care of somebody else. Being able to give people the occasion to help you in your spiritual development, so that your spiritual development isn't just being a hermit, living a life totally separate, uninvolved with the lay community. So obviously the Buddha recognized that the Buddhist monastery had to be definitely connected to the lay community. It couldn't be just an isolated, kind of cloistered monastery, self-sufficient, that didn't need lay people anymore. In some ways, I think that would be really nice to live all by myself. We didn't have to live with other people, didn't have to go out on alms round, didn't have to do all these things. I quite like gardening and growing things and cooking. I like cooking. Used to be quite a good cook before I ordained. I thought so anyway. Be very convenient. But the kind of mind that comes from, say, depending on alms is well worth it, because at times I have at times I've been in a famine. One year in Thailand, in a flood, where there was hardly anything to eat for several months. I went on a religious pilgrimage in India 10 years ago, where I just had to take my alms bowl and depend on alms food everywhere I went. And then, since I've been in England, depend solely on alms food. I haven't touched any money for 17, 18 years now. I've had no money. They're solely dependent upon alms food. And as you can see, I'm quite healthy, not particularly emaciated. One time, years ago, when I ordained in Thailand, I decided, even before I ordained, I decided I wanted to live in Thailand forever. And I never wanted to go back to the United States. I was determined to never go back to the West. I was fed up with all that, and I was just going to live my life as a Buddhist monk in Thailand. So after about 5 years as a monk there, some American people came, and so Ajahn Chah said, "Have you ever thought of going to America? Back to America?" And I said, "No." I said, "I'm not going to do it. Don't want to go there." And he said, "Why? Why don't you want to go there?" I said, "I'm a bhikkhu, I have to live by the Vinaya discipline, I'd starve to death. He can't just go on alms round in America. I can't keep the rules there. Not a Buddhist country. It's very different from here." So then he said, "Did you mean there aren't any kind people in America?" I thought about that. I said, "Well, there are kind people in America." And he said, "Then you could go there." That impressed me. It really impressed me, because I saw that the point of an alms mendicant wasn't just being a Buddhist monk and living by rules, but was a universal thing, really, in bringing up what is generous and kind, charitable in other people in the society. Now, Thailand is a very, very generous country. As as a society, the people are extremely generous. And they're from the time, from infancy, Thai children, when they're just little babies, their mothers usually take them out when the monks are on their alms round and kind of teach them to put rice in the alms bowl. So you see mothers holding their little babies, and the monks, we come by and they put a little bit of rice in the baby's hand and they drop the rice in the alms bowl. This kind of training it starts from such an early age that when you meet Thai people in India or in England or wherever, they have this great desire to put something in your alms bowl. So it's automatic. They find such joy in seeing a Buddhist monk. One time in London, and we lived in London, I was walking with my alms bowl. We go on alms round every morning up in Hampstead. I was walking up near Hampstead Heath one morning. There was a kind of big road with a lot of traffic on it, and this Thai woman was walking on the other side of the street. And she didn't see me at first. Then she saw me, a Buddhist monk, coming with an alms bowl. She looked so happy, she dropped all her things, just put them down on the sidewalk, came running across the street through all this traffic. The most unexpected sight to see a Buddhist monk on an alms round in London. And the kind of automatic, spontaneous joy. So that kind of, I think that's one of the things that really impresses foreigners in Thailand is that kind of generosity, because it's so much a part of their whole kind of psychology. One of the great values in the Thai mentality is being charitable. And also the existing Buddhist Sangha there, the Buddhist monks, make that very practical for them. Because even the poor, you find even in the poorest parts of Thailand, the people are still very generous in that way, like to monks. In the northeast where we live, some of the villages we lived near were really poor. People had hardly anything, but they're as far as luxuries go and the standard of living, lived in just very poor conditions. But they still had this great love of offering rice and food to the monks in the morning. That seemed to bring a lot of joy to them. They felt very deprived if you didn't go that morning. Now this inability this voluntary making oneself dependent in a way that is like Buddhist monks allow other people to help them so that it works together. There's a good effect from the villages to the monastery and lay people, the monks. It's like a mutuality, an interdependency. It's not just my religious practice and don't you bother me, don't you get in my way, kind of. But it's the religious life which is always including many other people within that spiritual search and development. And that seems to me something worth preserving in the world. And just in our experience in England with Chithurst, it's a very, very successful monastery actually, because it works on that principle. It's supported solely on donations and on charity. There's no kind of businesses or funds or anything. It's just been supported on what people offer. We've never even had to ask for help, really. Never had to have we had an appeal, I think, when we first moved there, thinking that one had to have an appeal for funds. But actually it wasn't really necessary, because people want to become a part of it. They want to help it. So that the spiritual life is not just a selfish kind of hermetic existence for a bhikkhu, but it also is involving many other people in that, in support, in teaching, and encouragement, in spiritual development. See, and that is something that I think that I see is very much needed in every country in the world. In European society and in American, we've gone too far with this being self-sufficient and independent, to the point where one becomes just kind of emotionally alienated and isolated. At least I found that. Before, I used to feel just totally, I'd become very clever at supporting myself, and had always enough for everything I needed, so I never had to borrow or ask from anybody. Very independent, very self-sufficient person, but become so independent and self-sufficient I couldn't even communicate very well with people anymore. Hard for me to get along with anyone, to live with anyone, to share anything. Become so independent and self-sufficient that I had kind of cut myself off from any kind of relationship. Incredibly lonely at the age of 30, just very successful, independent person. But really lonely and unable to relate in any real way, warm way, to anyone else. Then the monastic life, say, the Buddhist monastic life, making myself dependent, an alms mendicant dependent upon what people offer, taking only what one needs, practicing in a way that one is worthy of those alms, and not just living, kind of taking alms from people and then living in a very selfish and foolish way, but living in a way that arouses faith and confidence in the laity, then myself benefiting from the practice, and then being able to give back to the society. The sense of gratitude that arises suddenly about my sixth year it was, I felt this incredible gratitude arise, overwhelming gratitude to the teacher Ajahn Chah, and to the Thai people that had been supporting me all these years. Incredible sense of gratitude. So that before I was appreciative, but not really grateful. Made life easy for me to go on an alms round and then practice meditation. I could have a lot of time to practice. But so I was quite appreciative of the whole situation, but the sense of gratitude suddenly arose, an overwhelming sense of love and appreciation and gratitude for such generosity. So then one feels also the great opportunity to give back, to help those who have helped you. It's arousing that which is really honorable and wholesome and good, loving and kind in humanity, isn't it? We all have that within us, and we all really want to be like that, don't we? To be really grateful, be loving, be able to be giving and sharing, because that's what brings joy into our lives. It's joyous and seems right, and we don't hate ourselves, we don't feel, aren't depressed when our life is a joyous one. and there's gratitude and giving. And this is what so much of us, so many people lack. Not that in England or Europe or America people aren't generous or kind, that's not it. It's just that the values, those values have been pushed aside really, pushed in the background for the idea of being independent, self-sufficient, successful, attaining, competitive. Very competitive, aren't we? In America we're very, very competitive. Always having to prove ourselves, trying to be better than someone else. There's no joy in that, is there? No joy in being competitive. There's only a kind of happiness you get when you win. Which is short-lived, isn't it? The kind of, oh, I won, I'm the champion, lasts about 2 seconds. On the human level, compassion, love, joy, all this, we really, as you meditate now, you begin to see what the mind is, understand the kind of repetition, the habit, the force of habit, the attachments to this and that, to fears and desires. Really looking at what desire is. You're not judging it, saying I shouldn't have any desires. As is, we think we shouldn't have any desires, but you're actually looking at desire, so you know it. Looking at fear, so you know what it is. So that when desire does arise, you can let it go. You're not rejecting it, but you're allowing it to go away. You're not attaching to it. The same with fear. So that you're actually transcending that. You're no longer being caught, being bound into mortal conditions when you're mindful. But patience is absolutely necessary. Being patient with these desires, and so that you can allow them to cease. You can't make them go. If you make them go, they just come back again. So that's why in meditation so much of it is just being very patient, isn't it? Just being able to sit patiently with unpleasant mental states, letting them go, not trying to annihilate them. But not just being terribly passive, but really putting effort into understanding, to observing, to being aware of these things. Not just sinking into depression, life is, I feel depressed, just sinking into it. But putting effort into really being aware of the depression as a condition. And in that awareness of the condition, the condition is a condition, then those conditions have the opportunity to cease, to go into the emptiness of the mind, with nothing, no remainder. Cessation with no remainder.